Welcome everybody. I'm Karen Panetta. I just put this up here so you can see some of the exciting things I've done. I am the Dean at Tufts University for graduate education, but I'm also a huge IEEE proponent. So I see we have a lot of IEEE folks here tonight, but I'm the past president of the HKN, the Honor Society. I'm also the vice president for the System Man and Cybernetics Society. And I have this year, I happen to be the IEEE Awards Board Chair. And down here, you can see some pictures with some of the past medal recipients. That's Millie Dresselhaus, the first Medal of Honor recipient that was a woman, and the past president of India, His Excellency Abdul Kalam. So I've got to meet some wonderful people, and so will you. So let's start off by talking about what it is that we want to do as a graduate student. You know, you could be a master's, you could be a PhD, you could be thinking about becoming a graduate student. And one of the things that's interesting is, you know, if you're funded and you're paid for 20 hours a week, that's typically a standard requirement. But for you to get your thesis done, if you really think you're going to get your thesis done or your own research done in 20 hours a week, that's just not going to happen. So let's get that right out of your head, that even though you're getting paid for 20 hours, it's like you investing in yourself. You're gonna have to do a lot more work than that. And some folks like to say, well, I put my 20 hours in a week, I should be able to stop, and at the end you should give me a PhD or a master's. It doesn't work that way. The research takes what it takes for you to get it done and to satisfy the, you know, whatever it is. Everybody learns differently. So you should stop thinking as the stipend as paying you for a specific, you know, for you to get your thesis, but more as sort of just living expenses. And you're certainly not being paid well, we know that. The big thing that folks forget is that professors really are people. You might think that they eat their own young and they're heartless. Some are divas. Some think that, you know, they don't live in the real world. They just think that everything's all about them. They're very creative. They could be very creative, but they all have PhDs. They've all been through these types of things themselves, and they have high expectations for you. Now, those of us, there's two categories of people. There are those of us that went through a program and might have gotten beat up by our advisors, and we went through, you know, really the trenches, and we said, this is horrible. No one should have to go through this. And that if I become a professor, I'm not going to make anybody else do this and suffer like this. And then there's the other side of it was like, well, I suffered, so you have to suffer because my advisor made me suffer. And I always sometimes think of that as like, you know, perpetuating the abuse. So hopefully you're all going to get graduate degrees and you'll go on to be better advisors than even, you know, some of the good advisors. So please try to think about that. Humans, their faculty are humans. They have emotions. They have temperaments. They make mistakes, even though they think they never do. Just because they have a PhD and they're experts about their expertise doesn't mean they're experts on life or mentoring or even giving you advice on what your future career could be. It's really dependent on the person. So you might need multiple people in your life to help empower you, but your supervisor, the one that's going to guide you through your PhD program or your master's program and sign off on you graduating, is the one you need to really learn how to work with. So they're juggling many responsibilities. If you have an untenured faculty member, they're worried about getting tenure, which means they have to get publications out the door and they have to make money. So if you have to fit in that type of rubric, that if their priorities are these things and you're not helping them reach that goal, then you're probably not going to be top on their priority list. So this is one of the first things I want people to know is, what is your faculty members' priorities? What is it that's driving them? Now, if they're tenured, they might not have as much stress on them to get money, but some prominent researchers just love getting more grants and cranking out the papers. But they might also have a heavy teaching load of undergraduates. So an advisee, so, you know, registration period's open and you've got 50 undergraduates lining up in your door. You know, these are things that's part of their everyday work life. So how do you fit into this big equation? You want to be number one on the priority list. So I'm going to tell you some secrets today on what can help you move up that list. I just want to start out by saying, complaining and being in the face all the time, this is one case where the squeaky wheel does not get the grease, meaning if you become a burden, if they have to handhold you, if you're a nag in a bad way, you will find yourself quickly being moved down that list. So let's talk about some other things. Let's start out like talking about how do you add value to your faculty member in their lab. Again, I like to reiterate that just because you're a graduate student now getting funded, the funding is not given to you because you're wonderful, and you can go off and do what you want. The funding's coming from your faculty member, or it's coming from the department for you to work on specific tasks. If you decide you don't want to work on that task, then you need to find a new source of funding. So the faculty member expects that you are going to be adding value to their team, to their lab. Now, can you write a grant? Do you know how to write grant? Have you ever written a grant? Can you at least get results to help support an application for a grant or a publication? So what can you bring immediately to the team? Now you might say, well, I'm brand new. I've never done this before. How can I be expected to be an immediate technical contributor? These are things that you have to start thinking about, because it's going to formulate what skills or what actions you personally take to develop your skill sets to make you important to your lab, make you important to the team. And some examples, we'll talk about some examples. If you don't know how to write, or you've never seen a grant proposal before, maybe help start doing searches on grant proposals, say what upcoming deadlines are coming up. And when I say that, I'll give you an example. If I said to a student, you know what, go find grants that in artificial intelligence that combine what we're doing, and you come back and you say, well, here's this deadline that's next week. That immediately says, well, wait a minute, that deadline's next week. This tells me the student doesn't even know how long it takes or what the effort it is, the lead time to get a grant. So sometimes you might say, well, these things are coming up in stage, and say, this is, this obviously is in a week, this one's in a month, this doesn't sound like something we could pull together, but here's one that's coming up in 4 months, 5 months, and so on, and have a, how much money is there. And then if you actually read through them, you might find out that some of them you're not eligible for. So that's an example of just finding out what the requirements are for these different grant opportunities, even if you are not familiar with writing the grant itself, just getting familiar, finding them, finding out what the deadlines are, finding out what the programs are, and finding out which ones fit with your lab. That's a good experience right there, even if you don't know how to even write a grant. But if you don't know how to write effectively, what value are you adding to your professor, your professor's lab? Because that means you can't write a grant for me at all. So what is that? What are you going to do about that? Maybe, well, what about effective presentation skills? Can you create good diagrams that explain processes at a higher level? So if you can do these types of things, that's valuable, because one of the things that I hate the most about writing grants is coming up with the diagrams. I know what I want to do, and I will take out my notebook and I will sketch something and I will hand it off my team, and they come back with these beautiful diagrams. And it's like, oh, thank God I have somebody to do that. There's a skill. You might not know how to write a grant, but if you can take my ideas, my scribbles, and turn it into beauty, rather than just seeing boxes and arrows, single dimensional arrows and no color and no dimension. But then again, it really helps to be able to visualize the whole thing. So do you have the right tools? Do you know Python, MATLAB, for example, to start to contribute to get results? I like to bring up the Python specifically because I'm in artificial intelligence, and if you're in computer science, Python, even for other fields, anybody who's going to be doing any sort of machine learning, Python seems to be the language to get to know. Well, some students might say, well, my school offers a course in Python, and I can even get credit for it. And if I'm a professor and I say, oh, we have to write this in Python, and you say, well, I'm taking the course now, but we didn't get to that construct. The research isn't going to wait for you. So you need to be able to do as you go and learn as you go, and showing that to your faculty members is really important. So even though you might not have Python, go find a short course. There's tons of stuff online. You don't need a formal course. Use somebody else's as samples and use them as templates. be creative about, you don't have to know the whole language inside out to start to dabble and get something useful out of it. The same thing with MATLAB, tons of examples, tons of libraries. So you can really come up to speed quickly, even without a formal course or doing stuff concurrently. So figure out what immediate skills do you have right now, or could you get to help your advisor with research? The same thing with publications. What upcoming conferences are there? And I want to be very careful because I don't want you looking at and saying, oh, conferences, I'm here day one. I want to publish. I want to publish. That's an instant turn off to your advisor because you have nothing to publish yet. You haven't got any results yet. But if you're helping us to think ahead of where we should be going, not necessarily you, but your lab, your team, or even for you to go and attend and or sit in to see how other people present, those are examples of what I'm talking about. One of the biggest things that happens for me, I have 13 PhD students in my own group. And the first thing that stands out to me when I pick up a student is how well they integrate with my team. Now, they might come on board, oh yeah, I'm a great team player, I'm a great team player. But how do you join a team that's already really well established and be able to come in and contribute? Well, the first thing I do is I ask someone to re-implement someone else's experiment to code and understand and learn it. And if a student says to me, well, I don't want to re-implement this, it's already been published, it's already been done by somebody else, I want something new. That shows me that they don't understand that I'm trying to get you to learn someone else's code because I'm going to have you building on it. I want you to understand it. And that doesn't necessarily mean you go execute it and give me the results and treat it like a black box. Anybody can run anything. I can get a freshman in high school to run code and give me an output with somebody else's results. That's not what the goal is here. The goal is for you to learn what's there really intimately and understand it. Because if I'm going to have you contribute to developing it further, then you need to be an expert on it. You don't have to start from scratch because that would be a waste of your time, but you still need to learn it. You want folks and people in your lab to share with you. So sometimes you need to be open with your work and make sure your supervisor is aware of it. So if I say, oh, wow, they wrote this great function that takes in this and automates the process, and I want you to use that, then the other students should share with you. Simultaneously, on the other hand, if you write a tool that I think is useful for other people, and somebody say, hey, I heard you wrote this really great cell counting algorithm, can I have it? And you're like, no, that's my research, no, and you don't want to share it, there's a problem there because it says I'm all about me and I'm not going to share with you. Your advisor will tell you, what you can and can't share. So you want to be careful about trying to, make a name for yourself, but not being a team player, because that really is going to establish how well you can work together. And when it comes to making maximum impact, when teams work together, you have more publications, you have more grant applications, you have more success, and your novelty and innovation makes huge increases because now you're all combining your efforts together to make a huge impact versus these small, tiny little individual impacts. So figure out what your lab mates do and what's their specialty, what's their, what have they published, where have they done, especially for the more senior ones that seem to be getting all the time from the advisors. Have they written a grant? Did they, find out what they did? What classes did they take? Were they ever teaching assistants? What classes did they TA? Did that actually help them? Where did they intern? Talk to them, not just about, what you can get out of them, but talk to them about themselves like they're humans, so make sure you get to know them. Praise and support your peers during meetings and presentations. This is something you're going to carry through life. I can always see that students, it's very easy, especially when we're writing publications, to say, oh, this previous work did a terrible job on that, and therefore ours is way better. That's if I'm a reviewer and I see somebody criticizing my work like that, I'm going to reject you right out. That's a nasty way to put it. Even if your results are better, I wouldn't publish this. So you want to, again, we're human, right? Nobody wants to say our stuff stinks. So if you do that to your peers and you find mistakes in their code and you come to me and say, oh, Raul has all these mistakes in his code, that's going to get back to him and it's going to be hurtful. Versus, look, here I got, he gave me this. I might have found some errors. I'll go back to him and say, by the way, I think I found this. Is this right or wrong? And they might be, oh, thank God you found an error. Thank you for telling me that. Other than, and then if they help you with training, acknowledge that to the professor, acknowledge it in front of them, in front of the group. So make sure you do that. The other thing is every student in the lab has their own work to do. So if you're going to have somebody sit with you and say, hey, show me how to run these experiments, come in the lab and show me how to run this piece of hardware and walk me through this, make sure that you take good notes. Make sure that if you need to videotape it or, video record it so that you have it. Make sure you have questions ready and you're prepared, because nobody wants to waste their time and then in 2 weeks have you say, you know what, I didn't get to follow through on what you showed me. Can you show me again? Because I forgot. That will drive people mental and you will quickly find that nobody wants to work with you. When I have students that nobody wants to work with and they won't tell me what's going on, I know that it's somebody trying to be solo or be a negative with my team. It makes it really hard to keep them engaged and keep the team a team when you have people like that. So, integrate early and often. Keep an engineering notebook. I keep an engineering notebook. It's a diary of your day. And the reason I want you to do this is because you make a to-do list. Oh, I'm going to look at these 5 papers today and I'm going to summarize them. Well, I didn't get to that, but I got diverted, but I found this really cool thing. It's a good way to track your discoveries so that if all of a sudden there's a patent and you came up with a patent idea and you discussed it, and another student or somewhere, or even another faculty member comes back and says, oh, I went and I'm filing this patent. And you're like, wait a minute, I was there. I contributed. It was my idea. I was there. I should at least be on the patent. You have a documented proof that, hey, here it is dated in my notebook that I talked about these things. And it also helps you when you meet with your professor and just say, well, what have you been working on? Well, I can flip through my notebook and say, well, here's what I did last week. Here's whatever, here's what I've done. It gives you to different, and then I asterisk, to me, sometimes I asterisk really good ideas, or I asterisk things I need to come back to. And it doesn't have to be on a computer. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It's for you, but it really helps you keep yourself to say, here's where I was. And then sometimes I'll say, where did I see this before? Who did I talk to about this? And I can go backwards and say, oh, here's the email. I jotted down this person that I had a conversation with about it. I always say, keep your references and summaries of everything you've read in an EndNote library. And the reason I say this is it helps organize them in the papers, but I guarantee you 3 months from now, you are not going to remember, which paper had what, and where did you see this and who referenced this other one, or what was the significance of it. You will forget because you're going to be reading a lot. The other one is, make sure that if you need services, they do have them at your local institution. There is career services, library, funding for travel, research ideas, grant writing. See what's available. You might not need it now, but at least you'll know it's there. And if you don't know what you have at your institution, ask your advisor. Is there anything short courses or anything going on that I should know about? Should I be taking this HKN GradLab, how to train your advisor session? Things like that. So always get out of the lab and learn about your surroundings. That's really important, especially now, because we don't want to, we get tired sitting in front of a Zoom. Again, how do you add more value? Well, making your advisor's job easier is nothing more painful than for an advisor to sit in an advising meeting and have a student come in and try to present me something that I know they didn't even spend half an hour working on, or trying to make it look like they put in a 20 or 30-hour week on the task I gave them. We know, we've been doing this for a long time, and especially if we start asking you questions back and you can't answer it. So be honest about what you did. I spent, this many hours on this problem. I did not have time. I had midterms. I had, these things. I was sick. These are the types of things you should be honest about, because if you're making our life painful by saying, I said, well, I asked you to implement this. Why didn't you? Oh, well, that seems like a stupid algorithm and that's a waste of time. Somebody else already published that. Why would you want me to waste my time on that? that pushback is immediately what I would call, it's an indirect disrespect to your faculty. What it really means to us is that you don't respect us enough to do as we say, or you don't trust my judgment on how to structure the research. Or it, to me or to a faculty member, it could mean that you're just plain outright lazy and you don't want to do it. You're just plain outright lazy and you're cutting corners. And 90% of all the complaints that come in from faculty about student productivity, to me as a dean, it's always, they're lazy. They're lazy, they didn't want to do it. And I'll say, well, what do you mean they didn't want to do it? Well, that, you know, I gave them this assignment, they didn't do it. So, and they give me pushback. They don't want pushback. They want to have discussions with you. We want to have, you know, scholarly discussions with you. But you're not if you're not the expert yet, you're not near graduation, and you really haven't become the world expert on something like your faculty, when they tell you to do something, there's usually a reason. Okay, so that's one thing. Be prepared for meetings. I always have my students do a PowerPoint for me. And as they move through my first year students versus my last year students, you can see the huge progress in how they communicate, how they present things, how the complexity of the detail. But when it comes time for them to write their thesis, the grant proposals, they can take all these PowerPoints and help. It's a good template for them to recreate or to construct whatever they want later on, whether it's a proposal, a thesis, a paper. It's all outlined. Everything's there. Some of the details are there. And in their notes, they have to talk about this, present that. If you don't, even if your advisor doesn't ask for this, this is something that I suggest. So the most important thing is, remember, I have 12, 13 PhD students, plus undergraduate advisees, plus classes, plus all these other things going on and responsibilities. How do you think that your advice, I have a really good memory, but still, am I going to remember everything that I told you to do and how I told you to structure it or what your last progress is? I do take notes, but it's good if you know that you're in an advisor who's got 50 students, PhD students, and a huge research group. You need to help present yourself, right? It's like your resume. You want to put your best face forward. So here's what I talked about last time. Let me refresh your memory. Here's the block diagram of, here's our pathway, you know, through the program of the architecture that, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3 here, and then an arrow. Here's where I am now. Here's where I need to go. Here's where I was last week. And this is what you asked me to do. And today I'm going to present to you my results on XYZ. And if I need to go back because I say, hey, wait a minute, why did we use this again? And you can just go back in your slides and say, well, last week, here's the example. So it's always there. That makes my life so much easier. And I'm like, wow, the student really helped me make this painless. So that's important. And then now I'm going to summarize what I did. And one of the biggest things that students are afraid to ask is, am I meeting your expectations? Is this good progress? Don't be afraid to ask this. If you don't get a binary yes, no answer, then the answer is most likely no, and they don't have the guts to tell you. So if somebody says, am I meeting your expectations, and say, well, at this point, I was hoping we would be this further along, or I thought that, you know, maybe you blah, blah, blah. They're really telling you without telling you that, yes, they're not happy. They want you further along. So usually I have to say, this is great progress. I'm proud of you. And I usually use those words. I'm really proud of you. This is great progress. If I have a student that comes in, I'm going to say that they're new. I'm going to say, you know what? This is an okay start for a presentation, but I don't want links to papers. I want to see that you demonstrate to me that you understand the paper, and I want to see more of a structured breakdown. And that tells the student that, well, she didn't beat me up, but she's telling me I need more. And that's what, and if you act on it next time, it really makes a difference. So here's other pitfalls that I see all the time. Again, when you've got 20, 30, 40 students and somebody comes in and they show you results and they just show you pictures or graphs and they're not labeled and they don't tell you the significance, like, you know, a caption, I go mental. I said, so what am I looking at? Oh, well, I'll tell you about it. No, I don't want you to tell me. I should be able to pull out and say, this is my research. If I can't look at your graph and know what I'm looking at, there's a problem. So Nick, don't assume that because you've been staring at it and you don't want to spend the extra time to put the caption on it. Say what it is. Okay, this is comparing this to that. And what I'm hoping to show is this. You can put that in the caption. This demonstrates. I don't want to say, oh, here's the mean score average for the test I ran over 100 images. And what does that mean? Does that mean that you're looking, what are the key variable settings that you did for this? What are the, what were the ranges? What was the experimental setup? What's a good value? What's a bad value? What did you find? Was there something interesting that you found? So don't just run stuff and say, oh, here's the numbers, because somebody's going to say, well, what are the metrics? What metrics you use? Well, this is what everybody else uses. No, I don't want to hear that. I want to know why you used it, what the formulation is. And even if you don't have it off the top of your head, you should have it as a backup. And then I'll say, well, where did you get this metric? Oh, this is the one everybody uses. Well, where'd you find it? Okay, well, here's the reference. Here's the actual citation in the footnote. My other favorite faux pas that students do is they'll come in, they'll work on something, and they'll say, ours is superior. My results are superior. Our method works superior over everything else. Well, I've been doing this a long time to tell you that there's no golden ticket, that everybody's application works beautifully across all cases. And then I'll say, well, how many test cases did you run? Oh, 10 test cases. And all of a sudden we're the best in the world. And what happened when you had a different kind of image? Oh, it failed. Well, why aren't you showing me that? We're supposed to be solving problems together. You're not selling, that your work is the best in the world. We're problem solving and development. You come in and you show me something too perfect, I just know something's not right. So don't think that your faculty doesn't want to see the things that failed. I love to see when my students come in and say, I first tried this, here's the results I got. I noticed that this just wasn't working. And then I realized that maybe if I, did some pre-processing on this that would affect this part of the process. Showing us how you think and how you progress to the next level is part of your job. It's part of your thesis. It's part of your storytelling. Going from, having a step function saying, I know nothing, and then all of a sudden I get these beautiful results. There's no story there. There's absolutely no story. So think about your story. Here's another one that's another one. It's not all about you. We want to make it all about you, but it's not all about you. So if I have some deadlines coming up, or I have papers due, and I wanted you to work on getting me some results so that we could publish or put the results in the grant or present at a conference, and you come in, you say, oh, well, I want to talk about my resume right now, and we only have a limited amount of time. Or you know what, I want to know what I'm going to publish, or I want to, I'm looking for internships right now. If you come in and we have an agenda every week to talk about research, and you derail the conversation because you didn't give me a heads up about that, hey, by the way, would it be okay if 10 minutes out of our half an hour meeting, we get to talk about my CV or, things like that. If you decide to drive the agenda against what we normally do, that's going to make your advisor very upset, because it said that I'm, if I come in and I change the agenda on you and say, oh, you know what, you went and did all this work on this presentation and your current research, I don't want to talk about that. I'd rather talk about, shifting directions and doing something else. You'd be like, well, what the hell did you make me do this for? Right? You wasted my time. They want to help you, but you also have to be respectful to know that you need to plan that. So maybe we'd say, you know what, can we have an extra half an hour just so I can talk about my thesis? Or sometimes you're in a group meeting. And if you're in a group meeting, you might not have the opportunity to say, well, I want you to look at my thesis, or, I'm with other people. You might say, well, can we have, a different meeting where I can meet you alone? Or, is there something else we can do? So don't derail the meetings for yourself without at least telling your advisor that you need this time with them. Surprises are not always good things. And the biggest thing I always see is people make assumptions. So if I'm funding you, and I'm funding you to work on something for me, and you write to somebody else and say, oh, Professor XYZ at another institution or even in another department, I want to work on this project, this idea. What do you think about it? I'm like, well, wait a minute, you're supposed to be working with me and you just go and pitch something else to somebody else. Are they going to pay you? What's going on here? What happened to team? right? It's like you're going to, it's not like you're playing for the enemy, but at the same time, what happened to the team? The other one is, if somebody else asks you to do something, if you're working for a company and another company comes in and says, oh yeah, by the way, you're working on this new algorithm, come run it for me. You can't do that, right? There's proprietary things go on in your lab. Your professors are creating patents. They might have licensing, and for you to just take your work and that you're working on a lab, it's not yours. It's the team. It's the institutions. You're working on as a university. You are part of them. So until you're out on your own computers, your own resources, what you develop there is really got to go through protocols to make sure that you're sharing it properly. So be careful about that. Always keep your supervisor in the loop. And even if you do it in a class, I want to do a class project, I'm going to publish a paper with them. Keep your supervisor in the loop. They don't like surprises. And then I did a presentation on our latest technology to a company. A lot of you are going to interview, and when you're at the graduate level, they want you to do a presentation on your research. Well, that's okay, but you better run it by your advisor first to say, I got this great job opportunity. I have to do an hour presentation on my research. I'd like to talk to you about what I can present and what's proprietary. Your advisor will appreciate that. They'll really appreciate that. So make sure you do that. One of the nastiest things that I've seen happen is this faculty advise students, they give them ideas, and then the students run off and go and get a patent disclosure or publish without the faculty member. That's just plain wrong. That's plain wrong. How would you feel if you worked with the faculty member, you gave them ideas, and then they published without you? You'd be very upset. So don't do that. And then this craziness of, oh, I need 3 publications to graduate. You don't have the publications do not determine when you graduate. There might be a requirement that your advisors expect you to publish, but it is not, and it is not it's not a necessary, it might be a necessary condition. It's not the necessary and sufficient condition. So just because you have publications out the yazoo does not mean you have a thesis. So be careful about that. All right, so this is where I say, whoa, wait a minute. She's supposed to be telling us how to train our advisor, and she hasn't even talked about that at all. Well, actually, I have. Because if you are consistent in your behaviors, you will condition your advisor. You will influence them because you are always have a repeatable model of behavior. So you're building trust. You're always coming, my guys always come in with a PowerPoint presentation of what they've done last week. Here's what you asked me to do. Here's the progress. Here's where we are. Here's my problems. Here's the challenges. Here's blah, blah, blah. Here's some suggested things. What do you think? Here's the discussion. If I get that every week, I'm conditioned. You're coming in with a PowerPoint. Oh, I don't have to go mental trying to prep for the student. It's painless. They're going to come in and they're going to present to me. It really makes a difference. And I also builds the trust. So it reduces the workload on me that I'm like, oh, you know what? They didn't send me this paper that they wanted me to review until 5 minutes before, things like that. And it actually helps you integrate into your lab. So, I had this cartoon here saying, yeah, I'm going to catch up. I'm going to do the work. But when you get in and we know that, you're meeting, if you're going to meet with me and you have nothing to show, that is immediately the cloud that comes over like, okay, this person's trying to pull the wool over my eyes. I can tell they didn't do anything. You're not going to be respected and you're not going to build confidence. And they're going to be more cautious working with you. So that's something to be careful about. So yes, we are training our advisor through our repeated conditioning of our behaviors. So here's how you can do these things. So this one over here, this is another example. I had a student once, I live in a beautiful town. I went walking. The student said they were in the lab. I went walking downtown. He didn't know where I lived. And next thing I know, I see him downtown shopping, tourist, as a tourist. And I just said, what are you doing here? Oh, well, somebody came in and he was shocked. He was absolutely shocked, dumbfounded, because he had told me he was going to be working in my lab on that day. And then I bagged him. So because I said, I'm not going to be in, that doesn't give you license. So here's an example, right? The professor says, oh, I'll be out, blah, 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 but I'll be looking on your research. And everybody disappears from the lab. So if you're going to disappear, because you think nobody's going to notice, someone notices. Someone notices, and if they call the lab and nobody picks up, if they text you and you're not there, or they say, hey, get this in the lab for me. If you're not going to be there, tell them. Simple as that. Oh, you're going to be away? I'm taking Friday off. I'm not going to be here. I'll be here 9 to 12 in the morning, and then be there. Don't try to do it behind their back. They will find out. Somebody will know. So, that's something, again, if I know that I can leave, and that if I call my lab, my students are there, they've conditioned me to know that I can trust them. They've conditioned me to know, hey, I don't need to check on them all the time because they're good kids. They're always, follow through for me. They've never let me down. That is probably the best compliment that a faculty member can give you. You have never let me down. So, all right, now let's talk about how do you get to be this perfect person that your faculty member loves and adores. You need to initiate regularly scheduled meetings. Now, this is okay if you're one of a smaller group, but it could be bi-weekly, it could be weekly, but be cognizant of their time, because if I'm in the middle of midterms, if it's a registration time and you're expecting me to hold weekly meetings with you, or even more frequently as you get closer to defending your thesis, it gets harder for me. So you want to make sure that you have a minimum of every other 2 weeks, every bi-weekly, a minimum, and that you come in and that you show that even though we only meet every 2 weeks, I've been making progress. Here's what I did in week 1. Here's what I did in week 2, rather than, oh, here I did this in the past half an hour. So how do you get that meeting? Well, you ask, can we schedule regular meetings? If they say, well, I'll wait till you have more results to do that, and say, well, fine, let's get something on the books now. Is that okay? We get something. So what do you think? What are your expectations? You expect me to have something in 2 weeks? I will have something for you in 2 weeks. Let's schedule that meeting. And that way you're showing that you really want to be on there. Now, if you're in a huge group where your supervisor happens to be a postdoc, you're most likely not going to get a weekly meeting with the professor. I am told that I'm weird that my students get to meet with me weekly. But then again, I don't have 50, 60 PhD students, and I don't have my postdocs supervising my students as closely as, they're there to help, but they don't advise in that sense. So the question is, how do you, utilize, and do you really need a one-on-one meeting? Maybe you just rotate and present your work, and that's an okay thing too. But if you want one-on-one attention and you demand that, or you expect it, that might not always be the case, especially if you're a master's student versus a PhD student. Because if you're more needy, they're going to say, why am I investing so much time in a master's student who's going to be out of here in a year and a half, versus my PhD student who's here for 5 years? So think about that as well. But you're going to like, well, wait a minute, why should I be treated differently than the PhD students? Because from the faculty's perspective, they're looking at the value you can bring to their lab. Okay, so even if you're a master's student, you can still bring value by being that person that shows how well organized and how well you make it easy for the faculty member. That is nothing better to hear than a master's student being told you work better than most PhD students. That's really saying you're awesome. The next one is make sure when you're in meetings, there are going to be a lot of people in your meeting. Sometimes it might be the whole group. Make sure that you're there. Make sure that you show up, and make sure that you engage, even if it's in the chat, even if you're, you feel like you're lost, engage. Because if you don't turn your camera on, you're in Zoom, or you disappear, or you just don't show up, if you don't have the decency to show up for others, why would they show up for you, right? So the other one I want to make sure is that we're trying to remove ambiguity here. So even if it's a report that you're doing for yourself, it's always a good thing to document what you think you heard and what you're doing. So make sure that you're building this constant, log, and it doesn't have to be beautiful English right now. It could just be notes, scribbles, bullets, whatever you want, your diary out of your notebook, whatever you want, but put it in there. And so that, so that as you go along, you're keeping I call it my activity matrix. to say, oh, today I did this, tomorrow I'm gonna do that, I did this, oh, and I checked this, I didn't do that, oh, I learned this today. And it might be a mess, but at least it's enough keywords for me to reconstruct what I need to fill in. All right, so here's some issues. That says stuff, not stuff. But this is probably one of the hardest things as a faculty member. Is I have papers coming in left and right, theses is coming in, we're publishing our brains out, grants that need to go out the door, and you need a paper reviewed. So, when we ask you for something, the professor does expect you to jump. Why? Because this is your only job. But for us as faculty members, we've got a million jobs to do as part of being a faculty member. So when a faculty member says, yeah, I'll get to your paper as soon as possible, it does take much longer because it has to go into the queue. And so normally what I will do to my students, and I'm thinking when I wrote this presentation, I was like, oh my God, I know I'm overdue responding to my student. And one of the things that I realized was when I'm doing things, I do make a queue. And I say, here's the next person I owe something to. If you jump in and you say, oh, I need this by tomorrow. And I'm like, well, am I really going to out jump you in the queue over somebody who's been waiting a week or 2 weeks because you need it now? I won't do that. I'll say, you know what? Your lack of planning is not my emergency. And that really means that it's unfair for me to push you. And I'll even sometimes tell students, you're third in the queue, or you know what? We have 2 thesis defenses going this week. My full priority for the next 2 weeks is helping those PhD students get their theses done, right? That way I'm telling you where you are in the queue, and because if I just say, what am I going to say to somebody who's got a defense scheduled in a week? Am I going to tell them, oh, by the way, no, I can't, look at your defense and you're going to have to go in on your own and figure it out, or I'll review your thesis later on after, or we'll postpone your defense because I haven't had time to review it. That's not nice. That's really not nice. So think about that. And you can even ask, can you tell me where I am in the queue of all the stuff you're going to review? So I know, how many papers, do you have a queue? And you can even sometimes say that. So I heard once, the presses have so many multiple papers that they put it in a queue of which ones, so this, I know where I am in the queue. It's like, take a number. Well, what number are you at? I get barraged with email. I'm probably talking 500 to 1,000 emails a day. And what I will do with my students is sometimes, when things go and they'll say, Professor, I'm still waiting on your review. Rather than me going through and trying to dig through, because then I end up with the wrong revision, or I end up with the wrong link and looking at an old paper, I'll usually say, just send me the link to the most recent thing. And they've already done it, but they'll do it again. And remember, the thing that's at the top of our inbox is the thing that's going to get the attention. So they keep doing that. So send it often. Just say, here's a reminder, just so it's at the top of your inbox, so you don't have to go searching for it. Here's the link. Oh, I made update changes. I hope, so you're not reviewing the old version, review this version instead. And then the other people is another example is to keep them. Oh, I know you reviewed once and you gave me feedback. I made those changes, but I also highlighted and read just to bring your focus to which areas you really need to focus on for change. So you don't have to start from scratch and reread the whole thing right now, just so you can expedite your review to help you out a little bit. That guidance to me means a lot, because if it says, Professor, you asked me to update the conclusion, I rewrote this section, here it is. I know that I don't have to, for this time, if I want to give them feedback, I don't have to waste my time going through the whole paper. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta do this all over again. And in the track changes, make sure you show us that you actually did the changes. There's nothing worse than me making the same comment. If I make a comment up front saying, you spelled this word wrong, and then you don't change it through the whole document, I'm gonna be like, hello, did you not read my comments? So be careful about that. And then again, what else is going on in the institution? Are you going to be able to do your work during midterms, or whatever? Be careful, because we're busy too. And then again, try to zoom in on the most relevant, important updated sections of papers that you want them to focus on. So you might give them a new chapter and say, well, here's the results. I've summarized it here. If you want to look at this, but this is where I suggest you look. And what I did with my advisor is, while he had one chapter, I was working on another one. And when he gave me back my revisions, then I would switch and keep increasing. But I had to wait sometimes a long time, and I would say, I'm not letting it stop me. I'm going to keep writing. I'm going to keep writing. And don't forget, you have a committee. You should be engaging your committee members often. So just to sit down with them, even if it's hey, I just want to give you an update. Here's where I am. Here's an abstract. Here's, a link to the latest document. They might not respond to you. A lot of them don't, which is kind of sad. But you might make meetings with them to say, I want to give you an overview of my where I am. Don't expect them to read your 50-page document, but you can go in and get to them with the PowerPoint and say, I just want to show you an outline. Here's my thesis outline that I agreed on with my advisor and the committee. Here's the progress I've been making. Go ahead and ask me some challenging questions so that you ask me now rather than later when I get into my defense. Now, here's something students hate to do, right? Your advisor puts you on a project, they get funding for something else, and they'll say, oh, here, go train, somebody else on this piece, or go learn this piece. And they get upset because they derailed me from my major thrust. Well, on my team, if you're going to work with me, you're most likely going to be working on 2 to 3 or even 4 different topics and projects. Why? Because I want you to learn as much as possible from every different perspective. It's not just that you're learning, how to look at something this way, but when I plug it into a different application, what changes? Oh, well, somebody has tools and new metrics for evaluating. Can I use that on my side? I want you to be able to see all these disparate things and be able to capture and utilize the best things. But you also get to meet and build new skills, new people, work across different disciplines, and it really helps you a lot. So you don't drop one thing. You have to learn to, well, she's asking me to do this because eventually my piece of the puzzle is going to fit in. And while you might not see that piece of the puzzle, you might get it later on. There's no straight path to a thesis. It should be a story. Stories have drama. Stories have, failure. They have a climax. They have a conclusion. And I think that when you get these different perspectives, you get a really nice story. Your lab is your backbone. Your people, if you're new, and one of the biggest things I like to say is use a common language. Here, the language happened to be like punch cards, but if you're going to be the lab or you're in the lab and you see people speaking and they're all from the same country and they all speak a different language, you're not going to be able to integrate with them. So, even if they're speaking another language, you should go up and say, hey, hi, introduce yourself. And they're not going to look at you like, oh, go away, we're only speaking our own language here. And you should ask your advisor too, saying, you know what, I want to integrate better in the lab, but nobody seems to be speaking, they all speak in the same language and I don't speak that language. Can we work on that? Is it okay that we do that? So if, when your private conversation is one thing, but nobody wants to break into somebody else's circle if you're not open to them. So, and if you are an international student, you're here in the US, you want to learn English, here's your opportunity. Find a person that speaks English well, and boy, you'll have somebody to help you review your papers and things like that. And culturally, you'll learn so many things. Try to hang out with people in your lab. That's why I always say if you take courses with them, see what they're doing, learn what they're doing, take an interest in them, be kind and helpful. Oh, do you need me to, oh, you're doing this lab setup. You look like you're cleaning all these things. You need some help. You want to show me how to do it, and so I can help you out. My favorite one, which I still do this, is I'm not a good cook. I stink at it, but I always bring food and say, hey, I made cookies, here we go. Nothing brings people together better than cooking. And if you can't cook, hey, I bought fudge. Oh, I went downstairs and I got cupcakes. Oh, I love this bakery. Look what I got. Bring them in, share, and you'd be surprised. People be like, oh, I brought pizza. I brought a pizza, hey, let's eat some pizza. Nobody's gonna look at you like, no, thank you. But and then ask your advisor as well. Say, you know what, I don't really know anybody here. I'm new. Is there anybody you can introduce me in the lab to that I could connect with? Maybe they could show me the ropes or show me somehow things in the lab, and that works out well too. I keep saying, your theses and PhDs are not definite. You don't decide when you graduate. You don't control it. A committee does. It's not about your publications. It's about when you finish the work that your committee shows that you are an expert at what you say and that you just didn't throw pieces together and say it's new. Okay. And nobody can get you out faster by pushing on you. It doesn't happen. Oh, I have a job offer. Oh, I'm interviewing. Good luck to you. Your advisor could say, well, that's nice, but you're not graduating. So that's too bad. You just lost out. So be careful about that. Communication continues to be the highest point of disagreements. I'll say it over. Please write it down. And don't be afraid to ask, am I meeting your expectations? I once said that to somebody and I thought he was going to fall out of his chair. He said, well, that's a direct question. I said, well, I'd like a direct answer. And that's when I got the, which to me is like, all right, no, I'm not. Okay, I'm not. But how would you know that unless you ask, right? Because you think you're doing good work, but what they want might be something different. So ambiguity is still disaster. You'll be ready to graduate. I want you to ask this question because the papers things is a huge faux pas with students. But I wrote a paper. I submitted it to you. It wasn't published. It wasn't submitted. It didn't have the revisions. It's not a journal paper. Oh, that's not a valuable conference. These are really details you need to, first, I have to be first author. Do I know? Who cares if you're first author? Some people do, I don't diminish students by thinking they have to be first author on things. So think about what is the requirements to do this. And just because you go and you get your name first on a paper, if you then drop it and you're not fulfilling the obligations, they have every right to say, well, you know what? You were first author, but now I'm changing it because you just dropped out of the team and you didn't contribute. Don't think just because once you got your name on it, you're there. You're not. So again, when your advisor asks you to do something, be consistent. Train them to believe in you. So when something does go wrong, or you can't, when something does go wrong and you're not this flawless student, you've already built this trust that they're like, okay, so what, they just had a bad day. They didn't do it the way I wanted, rather than you being all over the place like a scatter plot. They want to see that you have consistency. So there's an example, when I ask you to do a presentation, give me details, show me what you learned. Don't treat me like I'm stupid, like, oh, well, you already know this, or it's complicated math. I am not asking you because I need to know the math. I'm asking you because I want you to demonstrate that you know the math, that you understand the flow. And sometimes I might say, okay, I've never used this neural network before. Explain the architecture. If you hand wave at me that says, okay, you can't even describe what's going on, there's a problem. You start back to faculty or humans, and unfortunately, you might be working with the jerk. No one should ever call you stupid or diminish your intelligence. And if somebody does, and a faculty member says something terrible to you like that, you can just say, you could say, Professor, you just hurt my feelings. You really, please don't call me names. You really hurt my feelings. And I want to do a good job for you, but you just call me names. How it makes me feel awful. And if your intent is to make me feel awful, it's not motivating. It's not motivating or encouraging. And what are they going to say to you? Get used to it? They'll apologize. And if they don't, they're going to say, well, if you don't like it, go somewhere else. No, they're not going to do that. If somebody hurts your feelings, you can call them on and say, ouch. Or, even that might say, ooh, ow, I didn't expect, that's it. If you don't want anybody to make you feel stupid. If I'm not meeting your expectations, then can we phrase it to take proactive steps of what the deliverables are or what I'm missing? But rephrase it to them, but let them know. Don't just sit there and take it unless you're not listening to them and you keep cutting them off, but you should never be insulted. Don't badmouth and complain about your faculty member. Remember, faculty members are together for years and years and tenure. You're a transient. You're only there for 2 to 5 years. Don't think your faculty members don't talk. They're colleagues. They're gonna talk. I'm the dean, and I see faculty members when the students come to me. I see that the students say, well, I told Professor X about Professor Y, and I'm just like, oh, I know that they're going to talk. And I can't tell the student that. I can just say, you know what? It's not going to help your case. You need to work the detail out, because now your faculty member thinks, what? Oh, look at this bratty kid's going bad-mouthing me to my peers. Guess what? You just went down on my priority list. And the same thing with students. They know when you talk badly about your lab mates. They're not going to help you if you talk badly about them. It will get back to your advisor. There are no secrets in academia. Learning versus handholding, again, if you're making their job hard and I teach you how to do something, we review something this week, you don't look at it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you come back and say, I forgot what you told me. You won't say that. You'll just say, oh, can you go over that again? Or I see that you don't know it and that you didn't reinforce it. That's down on the list. So make sure that what you learn today, you actually follow up on. It's sort of like taking notes, right? You say, oh, well, you remember it when it's fresh. And then the longer you drop it, the faster it fades. So make sure you document well. Finally, I always want you to understand that this is a hugely stressful time. And, when is it time to, students, I can't help students that think that they can deal with mental stress or mental health issues or any health issue and still be a top performer. It just can't happen. It's like, even if I have a student that's a substance abuser or under an influence of a drug or something, you can't be successful. You cannot be successful with this hanging over. You need to get yourself in control. So find support groups. Mental health counseling is nothing to be ashamed of, especially now with COVID. My God, the whole world has gone crazy because of the stress of being isolated, the new dynamics of working with people via Zoom. Do not be ashamed of it, because if you hold off, it will affect you, and accommodations can't be retroactive. Once you fail, you fail. You can't come back and say, well, I was stressed. I was this. No, claim it early and to say, you know what, something's not right. I just having issues. I need to deal with it. Help me deal with it. Help me get the resources. You don't even need to tell your faculty member what's going on. Find out somebody who you can talk to that can help you connect to the resources at your institution. And have a life. Really, have a life, but if you're going to disappear on us in the lab, let us know. If things are, going to do some other stuff, make sure that you know. But again, if you're going to go on vacation, let us know. Work it out. Don't just disappear, because again, you're conditioning us. We see your repetitive behavior, and as you build repetitive behavior, it builds trust. So in summary, if you're training your advisor through your good behavior, it helps us be trusting. It helps us know what to expect out of you, rather than this week he did nothing, this week she did something, this week they did this. And that just leaves us in this scared cat state of, I don't know what to expect from this person. They're a time bomb. I don't know what to do with them. And that's not what you want to be. You want to be consistent. You want to be revered as someone who's reliable, dependent, even if your stuff doesn't always run or work. As long as you're honest and you're working towards it, you will find that even the toughest advisor will fall crazy in love with you and make you, elevate to the top. So with that, let me know if there's more topics you need to hear help about. And again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I want to thank you so much for being with me here tonight, and be safe. And again, thank you all for everything.
There's questions in the Q&A.
Okay. How can part-time students like me contribute to these activities? I have a lot of part-time students, a lot of them. And sometimes we love to hear what you're doing in industry so that we can contribute. But folks that are in industry usually have really strong MATLAB skills or image processing skills. And we can give them assignments and ask for it. Say, okay, you know what? I'm taking classes, but I have extra time. Because normally if you're new and somebody wants to take classes, we might not say, well, they're going to take classes, they're not going to be able to do research. But if there's something special and you say, well, you know what, give me something, let's try me out and see what I can do with it. We're happy to give you those things. So the question is, just ask. Professors can always find you work, always. How to deal with teammates that speak their own language and never share any knowledge or info, but your PI expects you to be transparent with them and have them know and present all the details of your research. This is a huge problem. This is something that you can say to your advisor. I sat with, this person, I shared everything with them. They're not giving me back any feedback. They're not sharing with me, but did you ask them for something? So if you can go back to your advisor and say, or normally what I do is if you can copy your advisor and say, hey, thanks for, blah, blah, blah. Professor XYZ says that you have a tool that does this. Can you please send me the code? And you copy your advisor on it, and that person never responds to you, or then in the lab says to you, no, I'm not giving it to you, or just ignores you. You now have a saying, Professor XYZ, I asked on such and such date, you saw that. It takes a lot of guts to ignore when the faculty member is aware of it. It's a lot harder when it's like just between student to student. And the student might say to you, why are you copying the professor? I say, well, I'm keeping them up to date because I want them to, this is what they're the supervisor. So if I'm, off base, they'll tell me I want to learn, and we're supposed to be sharing, so see what these people usually stand out very quickly that they're not part of the team. So copy your faculty member on any request that you make to the other student. And then if the, say, professor, I didn't get the link, did he send it to you? It'll come out quickly. If an advisor never gives you deadline, you don't know your meeting time until one day prior. And when the conference deadline comes up, they ask you to participate week left of the deadline. How you should schedule meeting times with uncommitting advisors. Well, that's why I asked for a regular meeting. Like you say, you don't know when your meeting is till one day prior. Is that because they say to you, I'll let you know when I'm available? I think you should come up with your own deadlines. Say, all right, you gave me this task. I'm going to give myself, I would email them back and say, here's a task we talk about. I came up with this timeline. And again, you're training them. I came up with this deadline that in 2 weeks, I expect to have this. In 3 weeks, I expect to have that. Here's my proposed deadline. I hope, if there's anything else you want me to add or delete, or you think I'm on the right track, let me know. They might not even respond. But guess what? When you go in and say, okay, I sent you an email that I had this done in 2 weeks ago. Guess what? I have it done. Would you like to talk about it now? So you're training them to say, well, you didn't give me a deadline. I made one for myself. I made it. Now let's talk about it. So I would, be proactive in making your own. Don't go and say, well, I made a timeline. Here's my timeline. Give me, I expect a meeting by then. It's essentially saying, well, I did this. I'm keeping you informed. This is just, so you know where I am. And because, if between our next meeting, I don't know how much time you'll have, but just thought I'd give you this plan so that you can see what my intentions are, and I will update you. And then give them a PowerPoint, give them a short PowerPoint. And even if you're saying, well, I'm wasting my time giving them the PowerPoint, you're not wasting the time, because you're going to use that for your research, to document your stuff, to get your thesis written. So they might not look at it for 5 months. You've got 5 months of work already done and outlined. I would try to get on their regular schedule. Something else. The other thing is bring them a cup of coffee once in a while. To stop in and say, just stopped in to give you a cup of coffee. Here you go. My students do that, and I'm like, okay, I can't just send them away. So if you say, hey, I brought you coffee, brought you an apple, I went apple picking, something like that. Here you go. Bring them in for the lab. Other lab mates are like, oh, you're kissing up. Well, you know what? Bring the food for everybody. But if you stop and I say, Professor, I brought apples for the lab. Here's an apple. Even if they don't know you from anything, they're going to be like, wow, this kid's nice. Nobody ignores somebody who goes out of their way for them. Nobody. I don't care how mean and rotten you are. Week left to deadlines. There you go. If you've been working regularly on your stuff, when somebody freaks you out with a short deadline, you can say, well, you know what? I've been accumulating all this stuff. I think I can reconstruct something and do it. And as long as it's, put something together, they want you to meet it. I know that they expect a lot of lead time for you to give them material, but the reverse is not true. And that is just, I'm sorry, but that is just the Professor Diva mode. I'm sorry, but that's the only strategy I can give you is, if you're prepared and you're keeping up to date with your material, when somebody gives you a quick turnaround deadline, you have a repertoire to pull stuff from that you can put pieces together. And it might not be beautiful, but you respond quickly because like, oh, I got these 5 presentations. Here's the papers, here's the citations, here's how I can outline it, and go. And then the faculty member might be, holy crap, I gave him no time and this is what he came up with. That's pretty good. You are going to rise to the top. All right, let me see if there's others in there. And what else? How to juggle properly classes, RA position, TA position, all at the same time. That's a tough one because you have to academically do well in your classes, but you also have to meet your research. So in my institution, people usually say, well, I got good grades in my classes. How can I be being thrown out? Well, if your research advisor says you're not cutting the research, they're gone. It's like thinking of the boss is telling you no. So be careful about, carve out time. So sometimes work out, that's why it's important you work out the number of classes you're taking with at the same semester. So most PhD students don't take more than 2 classes a semester. If you're taking 4 classes, 5 graduate level classes, and you think you're going to do research, that's not happening. As a TA, yes, you have to put in 20 hours. And this, I had another session where I said, be respectful, when don't TA in your lab. You have your TA hours when students approach you. My office hours are here. I'm a student too. Oh, can you do a makeup lab? I'm sorry, I can't do a makeup lab. You need to work that out to the faculty member because I'm only, on duty these hours, and anything makeup is coming out of me and I'm not getting paid for it. That's the big one. Students, undergraduates don't realize that if you're only paid 20 hours and they're asking you to come back to the lab to run something special or do a special tutoring session, that comes out, you're doing it for free. Okay. And if they say, well, I'll pay you, no, no, because you'll get in trouble for that. But make sure you protect yourself. Say, you know what, I'm a student too, and I have my own deadlines. That's why I have my office hours. And here's my next office hours. And I don't have, time today, but guess what? Here's Joe Smo who's on duty, and keep a list of all the other TAs that they can go to and study you. Oh, but you speak really well in great English, and I like communicating with you. Thank you so much for that great compliment. But I have my own midterms and my own homework and programming assignments to do. So please, if I'm happy to help you during my time. Okay. But work out with your advisor how many classes they expect you to be taking, as well as which classes. Some students go and say, I'm going to take whatever I want. And the faculty member's like, well, wait a minute. Why? I remember once I said to a student, I was from industry, and they told me, well, our advisor is making me take his class. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. Why would they make you do that? Well, because you're that person. I came from industry. I was on my own dime. But that other person was a teaching assistant RA. And one, they had to TA the course eventually. So they wanted to make sure they went through it. But the second thing was they needed those skills. They needed to know those programs. They needed to know how to generate those models. And that's where it was being taught. So if you need the class for the research, it's important that you talk to your advisor about it. Okay. So again, if there's any other questions, you can always feel free to email Karen@IEEE.org. And if you are looking for projects, if you're a master's student, you just want work, reach out to a faculty member and ask them, but be careful, because I have a lot of students come to me, say they want to do stuff. I go and I spend a half an hour outlining something, and then I never see him again. And that's like, okay, you just wasted my time. So if you're not serious, don't do it. But, if you are serious, then faculty member will really be eager to help you. Or sometimes what I'll do is I'll try student out with one of my PhD students, saying, hey, you need a couple of hands to help you with this. And they'll give them a small task, bite-sized task, and see if they ever show up. If they do it, great, I give them more. If they don't, well, then I know. So, just keep it cool, take care of yourself. And thank you so much all for being here. I really, I can't see any of you, but I'm really appreciative of it. So at this time, is there anything else? Let me see, is there any other questions? It's more. Do you find that students come to grad school not knowing these things? Yes. As a matter of fact, you said, would a handbook be helpful? I'm so glad you asked that, because I am trying to put one together. Right now, I have 2 documents called RATA guidelines and like a checklist for faculty, so the faculty can see what they should be asking you, because faculty don't. So I think that I will put together one. I think that's a great HKN resources. If HKN wants me to, or IEEE wants me to put together my best practices and we create like a little book, I think that's a great idea. So right now I have 2 chapters. One is on, the research, one is on TA, and a checklist for new people coming in. So yes, I like that idea, and I just need to make it pretty. I'm currently trying to find a topic for my research. Do you have any advice regarding that? We do have a session. I don't know, Kim, is it already recorded? How to find your research topic? Did we do that one yet?
Yes, we did that.
Maybe you could put the link into that webinar. because we have, so GradLab has a series of webinars. And this one was on training your advisor, but we had one on finding your research topic and how to approach an advisor to get that done. So Kim, can you put that in the chat somehow? Do you have that link handy?
If not now, I'll email the attendee.
Okay, so we can do that. So there's another list, but if you watch that and you don't get your question answer, always feel free to email back. I'm happy to give that to you, but I like the takeaways of the graduate handbook to post for everybody else. I do have a blog under my Dean's blog. My most famous one is Death to the PhD Qualifier. But I do talk about things for graduate students up there, but the handbook is a good way to checklist to make sure that you're on target, and a way for you to also train your advisor, because a lot of advisors don't think, they think that osmosis, you're going to just figure it out because you're a graduate student. And a lot of us don't. I certainly didn't. I was ready to graduate. I wanted to graduate, and I saw all my peers in my group graduating, and I was from industry. And I finally said to my advisor, why are they all graduating? Why am I not graduating? He said, well, they have publications. I said, well, I do too. And he said, well, theirs are with me. You haven't published with me. I'm like, oh, no, how come nobody ever told me? Well, I was from industry. I didn't know any better. So, that's why I always say, ask that publishing question up front. Know what it means, because I didn't have that kind of training. Let me see if there's anything else. I don't think that's it. All right. So I think that's it. Have a great evening, everybody. And again, thank you for coming. I truly appreciate all your time. Bye.